Hi, this is Hilton Giesener, host of The Moss Show, a podcast covering all things SharePoint related at www.themossshow.com. In this video, we're going to look at how to configure your SharePoint environment so that individual lists can receive email directly as new list items. I'm starting us off here in an existing SharePoint site and an existing list so that we can see what things look like before we go ahead and make our changes. So if I go here into list settings for an existing calendar, for example, you'll see that under the communications section, all that I have right now is RSS settings. But once we've configured email receiving for the entire farm, we'll be able to go ahead and have a new section here for email settings for this particular list. So let's go ahead over into central administration and go ahead and configure the farm-wide email settings for incoming email. I'll go here to the system settings section, and under email and text messages you can see there's a link here for configure incoming email settings. Now the first time I click this, if I haven't configured incoming email at all, it's going to take a while because it's going to go ahead and try and connect to the SMTP service which needs to be running on the farm. So it gives me a little warning here, and it says the SMTP service is not installed, and gives me a link for some information to go ahead and find some of that in the help. So the first step is to go ahead and get the SMTP service configured on the farm itself. So I'm going to go here to Server Manager, and inside there I'm going to go into the Features section and go ahead and add a feature to this particular server. So I'm going to go down here to the SMTP server, and you'll see there's a few other additional pieces that it needs as a prerequisite, and go ahead and step through the wizard and go ahead and have the SMTP service configured. So you'll see it needs to make some modifications to IIS, the Internet Information Services web server, and some additional server administration tools as well for remote server admin. Once that's done, we can go ahead and see how to load up and work with the SMTP server and the service details underpinning that. So this will take a bit of time. It's going ahead and installing these onto the actual server. Once this is done, we'll see some interesting facets to this inside of the IIS admin tools, but we'll wait a while for this to complete the installation before we go ahead and have a look at that. So the installation seems to be pretty close to complete here. It's doing the verification stage and just about done installing the actual SMTP server. So let's give that a moment to complete, which it seems to be done there, and we can now go ahead and try and configure it and make sure that all the settings are the way we'd like it to be. So I'm going to close Server Manager here and go ahead and load up the actual control panel admin tools, and we'll see inside of the administrative tools on the machine that we have two IIS managers. There's the standard one for IIS 7, and you'll notice that though we can administer the application pools and the actual sites, there's no way to administer the SMTP server inside of there. To do that, we actually need to load up the IIS 6 management tools, and inside of this we can see we can go ahead here and access the SMTP server. So the admin tools for this haven't been pushed into the IIS 7 manager. We do need to administer this through the IIS 6 manager, but we get all of the management features we need inside of here. So for example, I'm going to go and allow anonymous access. We can go onto the domain as well, for example, and configure the drop folder, things like that. So take note also of the domain. We'll go ahead and now that SMTP server has been set up correctly, go ahead and configure the actual email settings inside of SharePoint. So one thing, if you have clicked on the link before, we need to just go back into the page so that it now detects SMTP server is running. If I go ahead and say that yes, we do want to enable sites in this on the server to receive email, you'll see that when I do tick yes, which I'm now able to do, I can go ahead and configure some of the details. So there are a few different sections I can go ahead and configure here. The first being directory management service. So if I do have Active Directory running, for example, I can go ahead and configure certain settings between SharePoint and AD to go ahead and manage the actual containers inside of AD. You can see all of the details for this listed in the help there. I'm going to leave that one off. Next, under incoming email server display address, you can see that it's detected the actual settings directly out of the SMTP server, which is great. And finally, we can go ahead, for example, and set safe email servers and so on. But I'm not going to use the automatic settings up at the top here. I'm going to switch it to advanced. so that down at the bottom here I wanted to go ahead and make use of a standard email drop folder. So SharePoint is actually now going to query this drop folder directly. Any email that comes in is going to end up in that drop folder, and SharePoint is going to pull the emails directly out of there and assign them appropriately inside of the SharePoint infrastructure. So that should be all we need to do to set the actual farm up to go ahead and receive email. And this will allow or enable the email capabilities across the entire farm in the individual sites by default. So you'll see if I go back into that calendar list, we now have that new setting there to go ahead and configure incoming email settings. And I can now do this list by list. So the suffix, the actual @sp2010 server .sp2010.local in this example has been configured at the server at the farm settings in the actual central admin, but I now need to go per list that I want to go ahead and receive email to go ahead and configure it with a unique email address. So I first off go and say yes, I do want this particular list to receive email. Go ahead and assign it a unique email address and some additional settings, like for example whether the email attachments should be saved as well. I'm going to allow email messages from any sender because I'm not running with full security setup in this particular video, just for demonstration purposes. So we're going to let anybody come in and see that everything's working. You'll see that the list information now provides the actual email address for that individual list. So we can now go ahead and load up Microsoft Outlook and go ahead and send an email to that list. Because this is just for demonstration purposes, I've already pre-configured Microsoft Outlook to go ahead and send to the local host server for POP3 incoming and SMTP outgoing emails. So it's already set up to send email to the local server. Again, that's just for demonstration purposes. Of course, you wouldn't have the Outlook client running on the server as your primary email client. But let's go ahead and try and send an email message to that server, and you'll see to that list at least, and I'm going ahead and creating just a standard email here and trying to send it directly into SharePoint. So you can see down at the bottom there it said sending messages, and if we go into the actual drop folder, we should into mail route and the drop folder there on the C drive, we should see that email sitting here. We do. That's an EML file, so I can go ahead, for example, and load it in Notepad. It's just a text document. So I can see, for example, where it came from and where it's sent to and so on. So the mail is now sitting in the drop folder, and ideally we would hope that it would be picked up by SharePoint. So we could, for example, go into the actual monitoring section here and have a look at the timer job definitions. Before I do that, I'm going to load up the actual services on the server, and that's because I've purposefully gone ahead and stopped the actual SharePoint timer service so that it doesn't bring in the emails directly, so that we'd have a chance to see it in the drop folder. Of course, not a great practice to do that on a live environment. Don't stop the timer service regularly to do this kind of checking, but it's fine for us to do this on the test server so that we could see things appearing in there more easily. If I go ahead and bring up the actual job definitions on this server, it takes a little while because it's querying all of the information for the job, so it takes a little while to render this page. But once it has done so, we should see a job defined just specifically to handle incoming emails. So when the list comes up, we'll go ahead and scroll down and see that. Okay, so the list is loading here, and we can go ahead and see the full list of jobs waiting to execute, all the jobs defined at least on the server. And you can see one of them there is the Microsoft SharePoint Foundation incoming email job. So we can go ahead and have a look at that. You can see the schedule and details of this particular job once it comes up here. And you can see that it's scheduled to run every minute, and that's the timer settings for this particular job description and properties you can see up there, for example. So it hasn't yet run. You can see the recent time is NA. We can go ahead and see if we can figure out why it's not working correctly, why it doesn't seem to be running. And the details for this particularly are because that the security hasn't been set up on this drop folder. The timer service is running under the network service account, which needs access to go ahead and delete the mails once they've appeared in the drop folder. So let's just go ahead and configure that security on the drop folder, keep an eye on it, and go ahead and look at the job history as well. We should see every minute now that the incoming email job is executing or trying to execute, and hopefully executing correctly as well. Of course, this will take a minute to go ahead and happen, so we could just go ahead and refresh the job history list there, and we can see we happen to catch it on a good cycle. We can see that it's now executed that job and that the drop folder is now empty. So hopefully the email should have come through. It's been picked up by SharePoint and it's been processed. We've got the address correct because we copy pasted it out of there, and all being well, it should have come into SharePoint. But in this particular instance, you'll see it hasn't come through, and that's because it wasn't an actual calendar entry. So based on this, we can understand that the SharePoint lists, even once they're configured to receive email, need to have an email that's appropriate to the kind of data that they contain. We'll see this go a step further, that only certain of the lists can actually receive email, but we'll see that a little bit later in the video. So let's go ahead back to Outlook again. Go ahead and try and send an email again, but this time as a calendar invitation, and hopefully get it picked up by that list. So if we go into the drop folder, we'll see it appearing in there again. And now we should theoretically potentially have to wait up to 60 seconds again for this job to complete, but we can actually go ahead and force the job to run again by clicking on Run Now. Once we've done that, if we come back into the calendar list, the drop folder should be empty, of course, and we can see that the calendar entry has come through successfully. So it's actually picked up that new calendar entry based on an incoming email, and we've successfully been able to communicate with a list via email in SharePoint. As I mentioned, though, this is not possible for all of the different types of lists in SharePoint. So task list, for example, you'll see even though we've activated email on the farm, doesn't have the email settings capability under communications there. And this is because task list doesn't support incoming emails. But something like a document library does. So I can go into Shared Documents document library here and go ahead and configure this one also to receive incoming email. Once again, as before, I'll go and say yes, I do want to receive incoming email. I'll assign it an email address, and you'll see the settings are different here for this specific type of list. So I can go ahead, for example, and say how I want to handle attachments, whether I want to save the original email message as well, or just take any attachments as documents. Email meeting invitations can be saved here, for example, as well. Once again, I'm going to go ahead to security there and just go ahead and say that I'll accept email from any sender right now, and not based on specific permissions for the document library. So you can see that the security does allow us to go ahead and set that kind of level of granularity for the security settings, but I don't want to do that for this particular video. So if I go back and send a normal email this time and go ahead and attach a document, so let's just send a test subject there, for example, I can go ahead now and attach a file and have that appear in the actual document library as a new item. I haven't got any files that I'd like to send right now, so let's just create a dummy text file quickly. Go ahead and create a new text document, and just put some content in there, just some random content inside of that. We'll save that out now and go ahead and attach it to the actual email, and go ahead and send that email to the document library. Once more, down at the bottom we should see Outlook saying sent, but it was quite quick there, so we can check in the drop folder, see that it does appear. Once again, go into the job history and make sure that that job executes. At this time, we'll go ahead and just click on the Share Docs and click on that once or twice until the item appears. So we can just refresh here once or twice until the item finally appears. So there we go. We got our timing quite well there. And we can see that the actual document has appeared now directly into the document library, straight from coming from email. So if we go ahead and have a look at the actual item properties, for instance, you'll see that down at the bottom there, it's explicitly telling us that this item was created from an email directly. So it's appeared as we wanted into SharePoint, but it actually goes ahead and gives us a full record saying that it came from email and giving us a full detail of the actual email itself that was sent. So you can see things like the subject, the original to, CC, from, sender, and so on. So in this video, we've seen how to go ahead and configure the entire farm so that email settings can be enabled for incoming email, and we've seen how to enable this for individual lists as well. We've also seen how individual lists handle this email setting separately, so some lists do and don't support email, and those that do handle it differently depending on the kind of list that we're dealing with as well. If you've got any questions on this video, you can contact me at hilton@geeseno.com, or you can contact Microsoft at tellus@microsoft.com.